Welcome back. Welcome to this conversation on disability, poverty, housing, a look at policy, and through the lens of lived experience. Today, our panel is moderated by Board Chair Dr. Michelle Hewitt, Board Chair of Disability Without Poverty. You can find panelist Stephen Vine's podcast, The Disability Diaries, anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find the work of artist and advocate Marie LeBlanc at her website, marieleblanc.net. And Latonya Ludford today brings us the work of the Shift and the Housing First Initiative. Michelle, I'm going to pass over to you.
Thank you. I just have one question before you go, Amanda. Is my background the right way round? You know how I always.
It is not.
It is not. Let me choose the other version of the black background. Then you cannot believe how often this happens to me. Let me
While you're
just.
doing that, Michelle, I'm also going to mention that I know we have spoken about it. We have disabled the chat because it can be very distracting for people with screen readers and other things. If you'd like to ask a question of this panel, you can send a direct message to Michelle, perfect Michelle, by hovering over her picture and the three ellipses and choose chat, and she will be able to get questions from you. Thank you.
Let me just say that I may not be able to get to reading them because I too struggle to deal with multiple things coming in multiple ways. So, welcome to our research symposium. We are so excited to have this today. We are so excited that so many people have joined us and that this will be something that is available for everybody in the future to continue to watch and learn from. So I thank you to all the panelists all day, but particularly to Stephen, Marie, and Latonya. Marie and Steve are old friends, and Latonya, you're very much a new friend, and welcome to the DWP family. I am also so grateful that today we have come together on International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and I hope that everybody is able to take the time to reflect on who we are as disabled people and what it takes for us to be here and participate in things like this. I'd also like to point out that today, DWP, we launch in concert with Campaign 2000, our third report card. So our third report card into disability poverty. So that's very exciting to us as well, that each year we're getting a bit better at it. And I think this year's is an absolute cracker, and all praise to all staff at DWP for being able to pull off an incredible report card and an incredible research symposium all on the same day. I'm sure we didn't really think that through, but never mind. So, on with this panel. I am so delighted to be able to have this discussion today to do with housing, disability, poverty. And I'm going to give each of our panelists 5 minutes to introduce themselves. Tell us anything that you would like to tell us about yourselves that people would like to know. And because I know this gentleman is very comfortable at talking to get us all relaxed. Oh, I should also say, if panelists, relax. A good friend of ours who interviews Amanda and I regularly for Co-op Radio in Vancouver says, imagine this is a conversation around the kitchen table. If you need to get up and get a drink, if I have my dog next to me, if you need something, we're all just friends here together having a discussion. Relax. There's no judgment. We do whatever we need to do. If we have to stop and repeat what we said because my brain, I have brain fog, and if I can't remember what I'm saying from time to time, I will say that. So no worries. Okay, so Steve, over to you. 5 minutes on the clock. What do you want to tell us, friend?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I feel pretty honored to be able to speak to everyone about what I've gone through. And so it was a warm summer morning in July of 2016. I woke up and I'm going to just let you know what's happened to me first. And I woke up and I went to work that morning And when I got to work, a person came up to me right away and said, "Hey, Steve, what's going on? You don't look very good today." And I just said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's all good." A couple minutes later, another person came up, said the same thing. A couple of minutes later, another person came up to me and said, "Are you all right? You really don't look good today." I knew there was something wrong that morning. I could tell with people's reactions, the way they were talking to me and what they were saying. I started to have a conversation with one of my coworkers about what was ahead for our day, and I started losing consciousness. And I started to pass out, and I fell. My head hit the floor. There was blood everywhere. My manager called 911. The St. Paul's Hospital, 2 blocks away. I was working at the Wedgwood Hotel. The ambulance came, got me into the ambulance. There was an EMS attendant, and he was putting oxygen over my face. And that subsequently was the last thing I ever saw. That was 9.5 years ago. They took me to the hospital, and I bled out for 4.5 hours. They finally diagnosed that I have had a AAA, abdominal aortic aneurysm, 99% chance of dying. I had 1% chance to live, and I did. I lived through it. I woke up 28 days later. The first thing I said when I opened my eyes, "Who's turned the lights off?" I could hear all the voices that were in my hospital room, and I asked who turned the lights off. Nobody turned the lights off, I was told, and I realized very quickly I was completely blind. I put my hand down to my right leg, and it didn't feel right. I asked about my right leg. I was told the doctors were about to amputate it if I didn't wake up. They were going to amputate my leg in the next 48 hours. I reached up to my stomach and I felt a bag. I said, "What is this bag?" They told me that this was an ostomy. I was no longer able to use the toilet for the rest of my life because they removed my colon. So fast forward a couple years, and I'm staying at a assisted living facility. While I was there, I was roughly 40 years younger than most of the people that were residents of this facility. I was developing bad relations with the nursing group there. They didn't treat me very well at all. They weren't used to having anybody with only one leg. With all the phantom pain I was going through and all the chronic pain was very difficult. They didn't have any residents that were, no, they had one other person that had some vision loss, but they never dealt with anybody that was completely blind like myself. And the stoma that I had exploded at times, and I needed assistance, and nobody there was had any experience with stomas. I was in a very bad environment. I had a medical catastrophe again when the nurses decided not to give me oxycodone that I was addicted to because of my pain. And remember, that drug was prescribed to me from the doctors. So I took the prescription. It helped my pain. But because they didn't give it to me for 72 hours, I went through withdrawals and had a confrontational situation. They took me to the hospital. They did some surgery on me. I got off the OxyContin cold turkey, got straightened up, and then the staff, the hospitalist came to me after a couple of months and said, "Stephen, the assisted living facility has decided they don't want you to come back because of the relations you've developed with the nurses. The nurses don't like taking care of you." And I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" They said, "We'll get the social worker to get you a place to live." I waited a month or so. The social worker came to me and said, I can't get a place for you to live, nowhere. So the hospitalist said to me the very next day, Stephen, you have two choices. You can go to the halfway house at 3030 Gordon in Coquitlam, or your other option is the streets. It's
So
either,
Stephen, so
yeah.
Stephen, that is the awful, but the perfect place to ask you to take a pause, and we will pick you up on so many of those parts of that conversation as it relates to housing, and as we go forward. And I know, Latonya, that there are parts there that you will be interested in as they relate to addiction and homelessness and so on. Marie, five
Hi,
minutes to tell us your story, sweetheart. Sorry,
good
I don't
morning.
want to be demeaning, but we're good
So,
friends.
thank you. I'm reading mine because I can't remember. I'm a multidisciplinary artist originally from northern Manitoba, and I'm living in Alberta now. My work, which spans from photography, film, projection, and performance, explores themes of landscape, isolation, and health, heavily influenced by my experience living with environmental sensitivities. Environmental sensitivities includes conditions like multiple chemical sensitivity, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and mold illness, which cause severe physical reactions to everyday exposures such as perfumes, smoke, cleaning products, exhaust, laundry exhaust, building products, paint, and the list goes on, electronic devices, Wi-Fi, and so much more. Even minimal exposures can make a home uninhabitable, causing housing insecurity and isolation. Because of my sensitivities, traditional housing isn't safe for me because I have environmental sensitivities. My van is my home, and I have to live a nomadic life, constantly seeking healthier places because I can't control the outside triggers that affect me, as well as the changing climates, which my van isn't 100% suited for. This isn't a lifestyle choice or having a lot of fun camping, but it's basic survival. Each winter, on doctor's advice, I travel south to avoid freezing. Avoidance became my treatment, yet housing was a prescription I was never able to fill. Clean air, water, and safe shelter, basic needs often taken for granted, are vital to whether I can stay alive. When I first became ill, I struggled to find help through disability supports, housing, and healthcare. I had to travel across Canada for diagnosis. Because disability benefits don't transfer between provinces, crossing a provincial border meant losing my income support entirely. This revealed how fragmented and exhausting our healthcare, housing, and disability systems are. It's not only the illness that wears you down, but the travel, the paperwork, the exhaustion of constantly falling through the cracks. After repeated denials, I asked my worker, I said, well, who makes the rules? My caseworker didn't know, but it wasn't her. So that moment sparked my advocacy. Through my art and advocacy, I strive to make invisible illnesses visible. Some of my projects include Who Says We Need Fresh Air, a projection sharing voices of people worldwide living with environmental illness, shown at venues like the LeBlanc Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Gold Eyes versus the Sioux Falls Canary baseball game, a newspaper building with permission, of course, Jasper Community Habitat for the Arts, the Winnipeg Centennial Concert Hall, and a couple other places. And I remember one woman, she came to me and she wept as she watched, finally feeling seen. Another man crumbled as he realized the condition of a friend that he dismissed years ago was indeed real. He wasn't sure his friend was still alive. He now wanted to find his friend and apologize. He felt so bad. And then there's an 8-minute film called Multiple Chemical Sensitivity and Environmental Illness Awareness and Acknowledgement. It's been screened at UCLA, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and a few film festivals. And I also had another project called Overdress, which is a photographic performance reenacting Maslow's hierarchy of needs from the perspective of a person with chemical sensitivity. And you really need that shelter, food, and air and water before you can climb up the ladder of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And last but not least, Illuminate Canada Yellow was an event I created last year, a nationwide campaign that lit landmarks across Canada yellow, raising awareness for over 1 million Canadians with these conditions. Beyond the artwork, I've worked in advocacy, drafting resolutions, speaking to councils, contributing to accessibility reviews, and helping launch a national petition for federal recognition of environmental sensitivities. Each step moves us closer to real change, inclusion, and understanding. Recently, challenge increased when I broke my wrist, making daily tasks harder, and I found it exhausting to find doctors who understand my condition and accept someone without a fixed address. Every appointment highlights how our system do not accommodate people like me. Though my home is unconventional, I carry it with me in my art, my advocacy, and the supportive communities I found along the way. Housing is more than just four walls. It's clean air, safety, and dignity, and community. Thank you for listening. And thank you for supporting housing solutions that include all of us.
Thank you so much, Marie. That, every time we talk, I think more and more about your condition and the way that people just don't recognize it and the difficulties. I remember one story you told us was you thought you could work outdoors and you got a job at a zip line, but one of the clients that came through was wearing too much scent, and that meant that you couldn't function. And so you thought you got the perfect job, but it was immediately lost. So I think you bring to this a very unique perspective that we all need to listen to. Latonya, 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I probably won't take the whole 5 minutes. I'll do a little brief intro to me and the work that I've been
whatever.
doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Latonya, and I'm a Canada project manager at an organization called The Shift. We're an international human rights organization that's working at the intersection of housing, financialization, and climate. So at The Shift, our work is grounded in the belief that everyone is fundamentally entitled to a safe, secure, and adequate housing, and that governments play a key role in making that a reality as duty bearers that are responsible for securing, protecting, and of course, fulfilling the right to adequate housing for all. In my particular role, I work with cities to strengthen policies, strategies, and practices so that human rights principles like dignity, equality, and participation are properly embedded into how housing and homelessness issues are addressed. A key part of the work I do focuses on engaging with people living in encampments to better understand their challenges and demands from policymakers, and really work to ensure that their voices are at the forefront of policy discussions. I also work on narrative shifting, often through written research and policy pieces. One paper I've been working on that examines the pitfalls of housing first in Canada, exploring why, despite its success elsewhere, it hasn't achieved the same transformative impact that we expect from a widely accepted and proven approach to ending homelessness. In this particular paper, I assert that this is a direct result of the fact that human rights foundation of the approach has largely been removed, limiting its potential to really transition systems from managing homelessness to actually eliminating it. And so with Housing First, we actually have a transformative tool, one that has the potential to fundamentally shift our housing and homelessness system and make the meaningful changes needed to ensure access to the right to housing. In a video lecture that I created, and maybe some of you have seen, I use an analogy with cars and fuel. So a car only performs at its full capacity when it has the right fuel. You can put in a different type of fuel and it will still run, but it won't reach its full potential. And that's exactly what we see with Housing First in Canada. By removing its core human rights foundation, principles like the right to housing and the right to self-determination, we've essentially stripped the approach of the fuel it was designed to run on, and then we expect it to achieve transformative results. I'm looking forward to discussing this more and exploring questions around this research because I think it really highlights both the promise of Housing First and the consequences of losing sight of its human rights roots. A little about me personally, I'm a second-generation immigrant from Jamaica. I have a degree in Masters of Urban Innovation. That just really means that I'm passionate about discovering really innovative ways to address urban challenges and creating cities that are more resilient, equitable, and sustainable. So I'm really excited to be here today, honored actually, to share this research, but also to learn from my fellow panelists and engage with all of you through the discussion. So thank you so much.
So Latonya, one of the things, and if you haven't watched Latonya's video presentation, you can find it on the DWP website, and I strongly recommend that you do, because it really takes us to this place of why housing first. and what happens when we treat people with a human rights perspective and we put that housing first. So, Latonya, one of the examples that you give is that there was somebody who was disabled, but when they were assessed for housing, they were found to be high on the housing needs, but there wasn't any housing available for them. Do you want to just explain that example to everybody a little bit, if I can
Yeah, of
ask you?
course. Yeah, no problem. So, as I mentioned, I work with cities in my role. And so, one of the instances, I went to a city to really assess the homelessness situation on the ground. And so, as we were walking through encampments and speaking to people and individuals, I had a city official tell me that essentially there was an instance of someone who had a disability. They were in a wheelchair, but they also had diabetes and a variety of other health issues. And they mentioned that they had been working with this individual for a while to try to find a place for them to be able to be housed and get the services that they needed to support them in the different services that they required. And they basically said they looked through all these options and they couldn't find one. And they realized that letting them stay in the encampment was a better option because the encampment received daily services from outreach folks, from people that came in with health services. So they said they're not going to get this kind of service anywhere else. So they decided that it was better for them to stay in the encampment so that all their services could be met. And that was just flooring to us, hearing that and hearing that that was being homeless was the better solution than being housed.
Right. I mean, I find that absolutely, it's stunning, but with both Steve and Marie here to tell us that this is very real, that ultimately, even when there was assessed need, the decision was this person remained homeless so that they could get the services. Marie, Steve, how do you feel when you hear that story? How does that resonate with either of you? Who wants to go first? I don't mind.
You go ahead, Maria. Ladies first.
Such
I
a
have a little
gentleman.
bit of brain fog happening, so I'll let you go first.
Okay.
I started a podcast over a year ago, and I did that because when I was in assisted living, I've already explained that my relations with the nurses weren't good. And that wasn't because of me. It was because I didn't have a voice. And I started the podcast because the disabled do have a voice. And I want the voices to be heard. And I want to be an advocate to be able to do so because we're not second class citizens at all. A lot of us are overachievers and very smart. And we've just been dealt a bad card, you know?
I think Marie and Steve know, but my research is younger disabled adults who have no other choice than to live in long-term care, and I have many stories similar to Steve's. I have a friend who is now my fellow researcher who is in her 30s, lives in long-term care, and is placed under a 9:30 curfew. Who of us and she's there, as Stephen said, the people closest to her in age of 40 years away. And so, we have these situations where as disabled people, we're put into conditions that we're not able to live in. Marie, perhaps you could tell us what you do on a kind of a daily or weekly basis to find a safe place to park and to live.
Oh, that's like a loaded question. So I have kind of like a three-part answer for that. It's kind of one of the answers is how do I find the place? Where do I park? And the biggest answer is what do I look for when I get there? So on the way, wherever I'm going, and usually to the US at this time of year, like everybody else who travels, I look on a map, try and figure out where to go. But then what I end up doing is I end up phoning places and asking them about cell towers, overhead wires, laundry exhaust. I mean, that's like deer in the headlights there. So then I just keep, trying to figure out what to do. So I just end up going sometimes. And now that I've been to the US, it's been easier. I find people along the way with chemical sensitivities who will let me stay outside their place. It's been much easier for me to find places to park in the US than in Canada. And it seems like it's more accepted, but I find so many people like me down there in vehicles with way less than me, and they've lost everything, their job, their family, everything. And it just hurts just to see all that. And we're all in the same boat. We try to help each other a bit. And some of the places that I park are outside people's places, or I'll barter what I can do, outside their yard. And if it's somebody with chemical sensitivities and I can go into their place, I'll help with what I can, but I can only do so much too. And Bureau Land Management is free to park in the States, kind of like Crown Land here, but it's not always so safe. You don't know who's lurking around in the desert or in those kind of places. So which safety do I choose? Environmental or physical sometimes. Sometimes I've parked at church parking lots, police stations, because sometimes I'm really tired. And if I end up in what are those towns called? Tourist towns. Well, there's no place to park. So I figured, well, might as well ask the police station. So I say I'm really tired and they let me park there for the night. And I'm safe physically. And then campgrounds, if my van qualifies, it's so old and it doesn't have all the proper, whatever you call it, toilet, all the things that I need to qualify for a campground. So more often than not, I feel better on personal property. And when I get there, the things I look for, I'm searching. So this is a long list: cell towers, laundry exhaust, power lines, wildfires, prescribed burns, campfires, pesticides, and it keeps going on and on. And then sometimes I just have to leave after all that research because I'm just too sick. And sometimes I have to stay because, well, I'm too sick. And it's like picking up and moving every single day. Imagine yourself picking up and moving and sometimes having to move 2 or 3 times a day. Like it's really hard. So there's no foolproof way to know exactly how I'll feel when I get to a spot. But the greatest thing about living in a van is I can pick up and leave anytime. Unlike having to think about breaking a lease in a rental home because they can't accommodate my disability. So this approach helps me find safe spots, sort of.
Thank you. That's I know that's a lot to share, and I think that's a lot for people to take in. That the way housing works for you is that you have to move your house with you to find safe spots and to be safe. Latonya, one of the things that you talk about is the what municipalities can do to look at places that they already have that they haven't assessed. So like a housing audit. What sort of places can municipalities look at, or
Well, we're actually piloting a project just like this called call it hidden housing. So normally when we go to municipalities and we talk about the housing crisis and the housing shortage, they often tell us how much units they need in order to meet the demand and all the reasons why they can't do it. So we typically ask them, okay, well, have you done an audit of your built environment, your landscape, to identify all the vacant and underused units? We mean public, anything public. We mean social housing units. It could be private rental units that are just sitting there vacant. It could also be buildings that could be turned into a home through adaptive reuse. So let's take up every rock and look underneath what we have before we say we can't. And so there's a variety of different aspects that you can look at. What we say in terms of underused housing, there is a lot of units that just sit empty, whether it's condos, whether it's residential units. So those are things that cities don't track. They might know public housing aspects, but they don't know actually private. But there's also social housing units we find as an also massive issue because a lot of them are underutilized. In some cases, there could be someone living in a social housing unit that's too big for them. So maybe they once had a family there and now it's just one person, but they have 4 bedrooms. And then you have so much people on the social housing wait list. So it's really about taking stock of what exists in the built environment that is underused or vacant that you could activate pretty easily. Maybe it's, it just needs a couple of renovations. Maybe there is a pest control issue, but all those different things that take housing off the market, we want to put it back on and figure out how do we do that, but make it affordable to those most in need. So that's the kind of idea that we look at when we're talking about the vacant aspect.
So, Stephen, I'm going to ask somebody to help to take you off mute. And there you go. And hi, it's Chris there in the background. I say hi to Chris.
In the background,
Yeah, hi, Chris. And I'm going to ask you, Stephen, so obviously we can see you're not on the streets.
No.
And I know that 2 programs and I'm sure Latonya will love to hear about one of them. Two
Yeah.
programs help to take you off the streets.
Yeah.
Do you want to go?
Okay, the first one, The Right Fit. They are a nonprofit organization with Paul, I forgot Paul's
Gautier.
Paul
Gautier.
Gautier, the founder of not only The Right Fit that finds housing for people like myself or yourselves out there that need a home to live in that are disabled, but also the Cecil. And I forget what the acronym is. I'm sorry.
Choices in Supports in Independent Living. There you
Thank you
go.
so much. Thank you, Michelle. And both of these organizations got me back on track. I have home care 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. I couldn't live without it. It got my life worth living again, is how I would put it. With all the disabilities I have, I needed assistance. It was almost impossible to get through any day. And if it wasn't for these two organizations, I would not be here today talking in front of you.
So I'm going to give a shout out to a few more people, Jane Dyson and Christine Gordon, who were at Disability Alliance BC. I was on the board of that organization when Jane was executive director and came to us and said, we have this great idea for a program. So what they do, Latonya, is they take off they got together and declared a housing crisis with a number of organizations. Anybody who goes and Googles The Right Fit Vancouver, you will find the full story. And what they do is they take housing off the market, off the general market, because what they were finding was, just as you said, Latonya, somebody may become, they may become the next person in line to get some social housing, and the thing that's available is actually an accessible apartment, and that goes to that person whether they are disabled or not, which then meant that it's out of the pool until they move out of it. So what this wonderful program does is it takes those accessible units all into one program and it fits it with people like Steve. At the same time, though, we know that, the reason I can quote the acronym is both my husband and I are Cecil employers, as we're called, in that it's a government program that's direct funded care, basically, for those of you who know what we're talking about with that terminology. And it means that we run our care program. We are the employer, right? So we employ the people that we want. As Stephen says, he has 5 hours a day and he's able to pick his own staff. So he doesn't have the issues that he talked about. I don't want to talk for you, Stephen, but I know we've talked about this before, and this is right in my wheelhouse. So, Latonya, I think that's something that really fits together with exactly the sorts of things that you're talking about. And of course, Steve, listen to him. He's this articulate, intelligent guy that runs this incredible podcast, and would have been on the streets without those two programs, which is criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And as Latonya says in her work, a human rights issue. Hey.
Absolutely. And if I could just mention one quick thing, is what we find is, homelessness is not only a serious attack on dignity, but it also undermines some of the most fundamental human rights, including the right to self-determination. There's this belief that because someone's homeless or in a housing precarious situation, that they don't have the ability to speak for themselves, that they don't know what they need or what they want. And in a lot of ways, the basic services that people depend on come at the cost of autonomy of those experiencing homelessness. There's so many rules and regulations around what you need to do, what you can do in order to get access to these services. And they're stripped away if you make minor infractions. Like, for example, missing curfew can result in someone losing shelter access. Like, it's quite ridiculous to think that someone doesn't have the ability to speak for themselves because of a situation that has not been caused by them, but in most cases by the system. And when we undermine autonomy, we don't realize that that's the foundation that makes enjoyment of all fundamental human rights possible.
Absolutely. And as you say, curfew, and you just mentioned, the things that put, my people, that in long-term care, are those same sort of things at risk of, we won't have you here any longer, so that place is meant to be your home is ripped away from you, right, through things that you have no control over, or you are forced to live a life where you have no autonomy, and that's not a life that's in your control. And I do take joy out of these pockets of programs that we find, and we need to find ways of making them national, even international. And Marie, I'm going to come to you because I know that you can tell us about a program in the desert in the US that helps out people with your disabilities.
Yes, there's a place in Snowflake, Arizona, and
I'm sorry, I just have to say to everybody, yes, she said Snowflake, Arizona. Like, what a name.
And it does snow there. It really does.
Okay.
So in Snowflake, Arizona, the government funded 4 single detached housing for people with electrical and chemical sensitivities. So you have like the 4 houses, and then across the back lane, because they're electrically sensitive too, they have a maintenance building that has a washer and dryer for each person. And that's because if one person may not be able to handle something, the other person can. But they do have rules of what they can and can't use as well, because everybody's so sensitive. So I found that very interesting. And then also they have the option of turning off the, I guess it's the electrical box, because if they're electrically sensitive, they don't want to have electricity on at night. I know I don't like electricity on at night, or I can't handle it. And there was like the fact that they had buildings also, like they shield like the radiation from cell towers. Like there's so many things they had to do, things that the normal person doesn't have to think of. And people from all over the place kind of flock to Snowflake because they're so desperate. But then they find out, I guess, it snows and they don't have the money, so they go farther south. So there's so many things in Arizona, but I thought that it was very awesome to see something like that. And when we're talking about housing, if we could build either new, which might be hard for someone to handle, or modify existing housing depending on mold and things used. So it actually costs a lot of money to do that. So sometimes you need government help for things like that as well. And I haven't found anything like that here in Canada, but it was pretty awesome in the US to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they have the ability with the warmth as well. I take it, I take it on advisement that it snows in Snowflake, but they, obviously in Canada, as you said, it becomes more difficult for us in the winter months and so on to be able to keep you warm, basically, Marie. Is the how do we manage to do that in a way that's safe to you? So I'm just going to answer a question that Kim is asking if my thesis is available online, and could you share it with us? I can't share it right now, but I will make sure that at some point it is added to our research collective, which I just want to mention because it gives me a good little segue into that. So we had at DWP, we found that we were gradually starting to do research of our own, because not much of the research took into consideration the most vulnerable disabled people. So, people like Marie, people like Steve, that often the people that the government would take part in their surveys and so on are what we often call able disabled, people who are very able to be independently living in society. And we need to talk to more people like that, more people like Marie and Steve, and those are the voices, those are the stories that we need to bring forward. So we did some research of our own called Shape the CDB as we were looking for the Canada Disability Benefit. We've done our podcast that we interviewed Marie on, and a number of other pieces. And now as we bring ourselves to today, and I have to tell you, the wealth, anybody who's currently listening or in the future, that we put out a call not knowing what we were going to get, and we had enough for a week of just the best which is why we ask people like Latonya to record their lectures for us. And we are now putting that into this whole place that we're calling the Collective, named after a very dear friend of ours, Claire Lee. So it's the Claire Lee Research Collective, and Claire passed away in October. She'd lived with autoimmune diseases all her life, and then she battled cancer for 7 years and finally passed away. And she was somebody who believed in all of the things we're talking about today: community, self-determination, advocacy, and for us all to be out there in the community. So one of the things that is a so basically, Kim, I will say to you that I can't, because I can't walk and chew gum. I can't find my thesis and post it here. But I promise to you that we will add it to the Research Collective. So I'm just going to my last question, because we have a really hard finish at 9:50. I'm going to ask, how important is community? Because Steve, you've reached out to so many people now through your podcast. Tell me what you've learned through the community that you've developed through your podcast.
Well, I reiterate what I said earlier, is that, we all have a voice, and, the disabled community has exceptional individuals. I have a couple of mottos for my podcast, and that is that the guest is striving and thriving in the disabled community. And not everyone is sucking on their thumb, having a pity party and feeling sorry for what has happened to them. They're trying to do the best they can and to do more, and making their disability, making them fully able to do whatever they decide to do. And the other motto I have is, if you can do it, do it. And I learned that when I first became disabled, there was things I wanted to do, and I talked myself out of it. And sometimes when you are disabled, you do that. You take the easy route and you say, I can't do it. No, you can. And if you can, do it. And we all must remember simple things like this in order for us to keep going and fulfilling our human potential and living the best lives we individually choose to do so.
Saturday, I went to, I have Leo, my service dog, and I needed to go pick some things up for my husband at our local Dollarama. And the button, and I'm in a power wheelchair and I have a dog at the side of me, and the door button it said, you had to pull the door open. A young man came sliding up, like a young man, like in his 20s, perhaps 30s, on his bicycle, and said, stop, let me help you. And this was somebody who I would say was, somebody that maybe had addiction issues, somebody that could have been homeless himself. And I was like, well, thank you so much, and let me in. And I said to him, aren't you going to lock your bicycle up? And he said, no, everybody knows me in this community around here. Nobody's going to, and he wasn't being like, it wasn't like a tough man way. It was like, no, this is my community. Everybody knows me. I went inside, and there was, I guess it was probably a local group home, and everybody was one-to-one with a worker as they were, doing their shopping. And if anybody's been in a Dollarama, often the aisles are quite full with boxes as they're stacking things. Every time the person with the disability said, stop, let me help you, let me move the things for you. When I went to leave the store, there was somebody else there that was opening, again, another disabled person. And I just felt so grateful to the disability community who, no pity party, no, oh, you poor woman, just, you help me and I help you. And so, Marie, you talk about that a lot, right? So, what do you find? Because I think you're part of two great communities. I mean, as a fellow arts person, right? You're part of the arts community, and I would hope that the arts community has been kind to you, but being part of not just the disability community, but a specific, like your people in the disability, how's that work? Just give us some, we've only got a few minutes, just give us the closing moments.
Okay. Well, it's pretty awesome when I meet other people down there like myself, or I can stay at someone's house and they're really down and out. We help each other. I stay at their place, I help them out. They let me stay. Or in the beginning, someone was kind of showing me some of the, the how to do the camping thing down there. And in Snowflake too, the first time I went there. And I think there's a surrounding community of a whole bunch of people that live there besides those four houses. And I met so many people, and it's just so nice to know they're, even though everybody's pretty down, not that they're down and out, that's the wrong word. They're all struggling as well, but they have their safe housing, which is great. And they're so willing to help you, give you information. So for me, I found that amazing. Even the Facebook groups in the beginning, I was at a loss, and people, I just started asking questions, and they're all together helping each other, trying to just get through the day. Or if somebody's having issue with scent in a place, somebody else will give information. Well, how do you deal with this? So I think that's just amazing that everybody's willing to help each other. And I do like what Steve said. Oh, did I get your name right? I'm so bad with
Yes,
names.
you did. You
when
did.
he was talking about do what you can, and for me, I do what I can, but I also have people saying, well, if you can do that, why can't you do this? Or you're shopping, why can't you do that? Well, I'm only shopping because I have to. I mean, I feel like saying, if you want to shop for me, you
For
can.
me, please do. Yes. So I'm just going to mention that Steve's put on a very natty cap that appears to be advertising his podcast, The Disability Diaries with Stephen Vine, and I want to know where mine is. Anyway, Latonya, what does it mean to you in your research? We have a couple of minutes. When you hear disabled people like this talk about community within the disability community, how can that impact the way you work with municipalities, perhaps? Tough question, maybe.
I mean, the initial thing that I thought of when the word community came up was tent communities. So
Right.
we know them as homeless encampments, but when we speak to residents, they say, no, it's not an encampment, it's a community. And when you're able to go inside of these communities and speak to individuals living in homelessness, it's like any other neighborhood. They have rules, they create support, they keep each other safe, they look out for one another. And I think cities, what they do is they choose to use, words are very powerful. And they choose to use words like encampments because it takes away that community element. And then that justifies them being able to displace people or evict people. But in reality, they've created a community in the absence of the government stepping in and providing the housing that they need. They've done it themselves. And they've also surrounded themselves with communities. So I think that word is just so important. And when the governments are faced with that word, it requires a different response. Because if I say it's a tent community, then you can't go in with police and remove people's stuff and take them out and forcibly remove them because this is a community. And so I think words have so much power. And there's also so much power within community and what they can do to push policy agendas to get governments to listen to them. And I think that's really what governments sometimes are really afraid of, is that community aspect because of the power that's really inside of that. And if we look across the world at different examples of, homelessness advocacy groups at the national level that come together, that some of the biggest advancements we see with housing and homeless policy has been a result of people with lived experience coming together and forcing the government to listen to their voices and respond to their policy demands. So community is highly essentially important.
Thank you, Latonya. What great words to finish with, the power of community. And we know within the disability community, we are extremely powerful. And I thank everybody. I know, Marie and Steve, I asked you to step outside your comfort zone to do this today, and you were both masterful. Latonya, your work, I've made some notes because there's some things in Kelowna that I really want to talk to you about and see as I continue to work in my local community. Thank you to everybody. I'm sorry if there were questions coming up that I didn't get to. I'm just not able. As I say, I can talk, but I can't click and talk. So very, very best wishes to all of you. Happy IDPD, if that makes any sense to everybody. Happy International Day of People with Disabilities. And I'm going to pass this back to Amanda and the tech support, and they're going to put the automatic reel on.
Great job.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Bye.